Hey guys, what's going on? Daniel here. In today's episode, I just want to discuss a couple scenarios that may lead to poor steering. And what I mean by that is when you're driving and you find that either your steering is very stiff or very hard to turn, or maybe it's very soft and then all of a sudden it gets really hard. Also, another one is when you're turning your steering wheel and it's making like a whining sound every time. Maybe you go full lock, even when you don't go full lock and you're still making that whining sound. That could be a power steering issue that you have. Now, there's a couple of scenarios that I can run through just to diagnose some of those issues. Now, if you're having issues with your steering, the first thing to look at is go to your power steering reservoir, which is in the engine bay right at the front next to your driver's side headlight, right behind it, here in Australia anyway. So you have a look at that, and then when the car is running, if you see some bubbles, maybe some sort of like a milky color, you definitely have air in the system, which isn't good because it can damage your power steering pump, which I had to do. So I had that issue. Now, the first one is power steering line. You might have some sort of crack in there. Maybe you got a gouge taken out of it or something like that. There's something that's damaged on that power steering line that allows air to seep in. Another one is if it's not fastened correctly to the power steering rack or the power steering pump, and also connecting to the power steering reservoir. If there's some sort of air, it could be coming out of one of those hoses. That you would want to have a look, make sure it's all tightened fastly, and if there's no issue if it's all tight, then it's probably that maybe there's a gouge somewhere that you're not seeing some sort of leak. Now, another possibility is you have a leak on the power steering pump. Now, I had this issue as well. So behind the power steering pump, you have a tiny leak that forms behind and it sort of drips down, and then that allows air to come back into the system. Now, ways to look out for it is sort of look behind the power steering pump, and then you can see some sort of liquid, and a big giveaway, if it's really dramatic, you'll see it on the engine bay underneath it. You'll have a big pool of power steering fluid, which I had that as well. Now, I'll show you where I'm talking about on the power steering pump, where I saw my leak. Now, where you normally see a leak, or where I saw a leak anyway, was right behind, that's the front of the power steering pump, and this is the rear. So, and where I saw it was right here in that groove. So at the time, it didn't look too bad. It just looked like it was pulling a little bit, and I drove for about a day. But what I didn't realize is where this sits underneath it, about here on the engine block, it was full with power steering fluid. So that I definitely had to stop and then rethink, okay, what do we do next with that? Now, if you have a leak on the back of this, you would have to replace the power steering pump, unless you want to dive right into it, take all the bolts and that sort of thing. I haven't done that, so I'm not too sure, but I just replaced the system itself. Now, another issue that you could be having, the air could be getting into the system, is that where the power steering pump and the power steering line both join on top. Now, there's a small little seal in between that if it's not lubricated correctly, or maybe it's old and it's fallen apart, then air can begin sucked into that system, then putting air into your system and giving you bad steering. Now, I'll show you that as well, the issue that I had. I just have to replace that seal, and that's pretty cheap itself. Now, so you can see here, once again, we've got the pulley, power steering pump, sorry. Take the one bolt off, and this connects. This is your power steering line that connects to the whole line. This is just your fitting. So now this comes with a little seal like that. It's a small one. So once again, so if that is damaged or not lubricated, then it's not good. It won't do you any good because it allows air to get into the system. So your best bet is, if you want to retry and see if you just need a bit of lubrication, put some sort of power steering fluid, put it back in, seal it up, put the bolt in, and then tighten it down, and hopefully that solves your issue. Otherwise, you'll just have to get a new seal, but that's not expensive whatsoever. Guys, just make sure that if you do like this type of video, please hit the like button below, and if you want to see future content maybe around my Subaru or these types of issues, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. And also if you have any other questions or anything like that, put them in the comments down below and I'll get back to you. And maybe some other people can help you out as well. Another one is if you're turning full lock and then you feel the car starts to sort of shudder and then it stalls, that could be an issue. So I had that issue when I went full lock. It sort of shuttered and then it just shut off, which was wrong. At the time I thought I stalled it. It's a manual car, I thought I stalled it, but then it happened when like my clutch was completely in and it's still stalled. So that is another possible issue, that when you're doing a full lock, it puts extra load onto the power steering pump, then it can stall the car, because that's what happened with mine, because my pulley on my power steering pump actually stalled, as you see in the previous clip, that the pulley was actually stalled. I'll show you. So it's jammed. So the car, when I turned it full lock, it actually stalled, and my belief is when the belt was on this, it actually stalled the car because there was so much friction on this and it wouldn't want to budge. So that's definitely another issue that would destroy your power steering pump if you sort of stall the car when you're doing a full lock. That's definitely a big issue. So if you hear that it's whining when you're turning your steering wheel, your best thing is to check the power steering reservoir to see if there's any power steering fluid in there. If it's low, then obviously there's a leak somewhere, or if you see bubbles, same thing, there's a leak somewhere. Air's getting in the system and the liquid's coming out. So that's something you would have to investigate yourself to see, like I showed with the other solutions, what that possible issue is. Is it the pump? Is it maybe one of the connections? Is it the power steering rack? Because the power steering rack could be an issue as well. It could be leaking from there. So there's definitely a few options, but you can sort of narrow that down with the different scenarios that I've given to you, so you can sort of tick them off. So your best bet is to maybe lift up the car, put it on jack stands, have a look underneath, see if you can see a leak somewhere. Same thing on top, have a look if you can see any leaks, and then sort of investigate further. Once you have finished all that, you've fixed the issue, or you believe you fixed the issue, you put everything back together, fill up the power steering fluid, make sure that it's in the right level, and probably have it close to the top, so that way when you're steering it, the power steering fluid goes inside. So once you jack it up, put it on jack stands, you want to make sure that your wheels are clear. Do not turn it on yet. If it's a power steering pump or a power steering line, you would want to go full lock for about 5 minutes, make sure all the bubbles are out. But if it's something simple like one of the seals, not so much. Check that the bubbles are out as much as possible in the reservoir. Then you can turn on the car. It will slowly whine a little bit more. That's when you keep doing it until the whine goes away, and also there's no bubbles in the system. That otherwise, if there's bubbles in the system, you'll keep whining and you'll have issues, and further down the line, you would have to replace your power steering pump again. So that's the last thing you want. I did it twice. So now that you've got all the bubbles out of the system, you had the car running, then you can turn off the car, obviously, take it off the jack stands, go for a drive, and try and listen and feel the steering to see maybe if there's any more bubbles or if there's more whining. Because I had that at the beginning, I did have a bit of whining because I didn't take all the bubbles out. So maybe go for a small drive, and that should be the end of that issue. And also, just for you to know that the power steering pump, if you're thinking that may be jammed, the mechanism, the pulley should be spinning smoothly. It shouldn't be hard to turn. Mine doesn't turn whatsoever, as you saw before. So it should be able to spin it by hand. Obviously, if the belt is off, you can't spin it when the belt is on. So that's definitely a thing. Also check if the pulley belt is loose, then maybe you have to tighten it, because maybe the pump wasn't working because the belt wasn't on correctly. So maybe tighten up the belt, and that might solve one of the issues as well. You want to be able to turn about 90 degrees, but not too much more. Just so you guys are aware, I have a 2003 Wrx Subaru. So the positioning of the power steering pump and that sort of thing might be slightly different with your car, but hopefully these can sort of give you an idea on where to go with your issues. For the next video, I've actually replaced the power steering pump. How I did it, it'll be a how-to video, sort of diagnosing that as well. My Instagram, I'll have a link in the description down below. Make sure to give that a follow if you want to stay up to date with my Subaru, and also behind the scenes of the videos as well. That's it for this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next video.